Hello there, Pittsburgh Steelers fans, and welcome to the very first episode of Steelers Brunch with Tony, and I am your host, Tony Defeo. So, you guys have been asking for me to have my own show for a long time, and I appreciate that. So, here I am, and I am so thankful that everybody's going to join me today. And before I begin the broadcast, I'd like to encourage everybody to click on and subscribe to BTSC's YouTube channel. We have a whole host of podcasts, and you can get the standard with Jeff Hartman and Lance Williams, and I think Brian Anthony Davis sometimes is on there. He's everywhere. The legendary BAD. Yeah, I said it. Hosted by Lance Williams. I listened to his broadcast last night about Andy Dalton, and Lance is really good. And even if you don't agree with him, you can kind of get behind what he's saying. He really has a great way of putting things and laying out his ideas. So there's Steelers Q&A every Monday at 5:00 with Brian Anthony Davis and myself. That's during the off season. During the regular season, it's called Steelers Hangover, where we talk about the previous day's Steeler game. So if you subscribe, you'll get alerted anytime there's a show, which everybody in my live chat, I'm sure, has just been alerted to my new show. So, I'll get a ping like once or twice a day on my phone. I'm thinking it's a text message, but it's not. It's a notification informing me that there's another BTSC podcast. They do a really great job breaking down the Steelers with opinion, commentary, news. As far as the actual BTA's Behind the Steel Curtain site, you can expect 10 articles every day. There's news. There's Jeff Hartman and Dave Schofield, the editor and deputy editor. They're always up on the details with the news. Anytime a story breaks, you can always count on them. There's commentary. There's film breakdown. You just get everything. It's the greatest Steelers site on the internet, as far as I'm concerned. I've been writing for them for 10 years. So. Anyway, I'm very excited to join you guys for my first episode today, and hi to everybody who's saying hi to me. Hi, and just go easy on me today. Picture Mason Rudolph against the 49ers. A lot of short passes, safe calls, maybe some wildcat. I have the plays on my wrist, so I'll see if I can do a good job for you today. And I figure I will talk about the draft. That's what it's my first episode, and I figured why not go for the low-hanging fruit and discuss the Steelers 2020 draft class, which is about a week old now. The draft was last weekend, and the Steelers had 6 picks and none in the first round. So I will go over each pick and my thoughts on each pick and what that can mean for 2020 and beyond. And even for what it can mean for some current Steelers already on the roster, what it can mean for their contract situations, things of that nature. And then after that, I will open it up to some questions, and hopefully I can get to all the questions on there. I see some familiar faces. Brian Anthony Davis, good old Baz on there. Mark Tobin, Dennis Sheridan, the legendary Dennis Sheridan's on there. So Kenneth McNair, always a great contributor. So. If I don't get to your question right away, I'll try to get to it at the end of the show. So let's talk about the 2020 draft, the Steelers draft. And before we get into that, first of all, they were never going to quote unquote win the draft, as I've said before. I knew that basically for months heading into the draft because they didn't have a number 1 pick and they only had 6 picks. So, when people judge a team's draft class, they usually judge it by how many areas did they address? How many areas of need did they address during the draft? They judge it by draft value in each round, and they judge it by quantity of picks. I mean, people love the quantity. They love the picks. Like if you gave your average fan or expert a choice between the number 1 overall pick for a team or just a quantity of picks, they're almost always going to go with the picks. They love the picks. And again, the Steelers didn't have the quantity, and I'm not sure if they impressed people with the draft value. So I knew they weren't going to win the draft. The question is, did they do enough with the resources that they had to address as many areas as they could? And before I even get into it, I think they did. They only had 2 picks in the first 102. So, and they only had 6 picks total, as I said. So they did as well as they could. And as far as what they needed to address first, that was really a matter of opinion, honestly. I mean, some years, including 2019, heading into the 2019 draft, when they ultimately traded up to select Devin Bush, the inside linebacker, I think that was pretty clear that that was their biggest area of need, and they need to be aggressive to do that. That was an obvious hole that they had to fill right away. They had to plug. He was a guy who was going to probably come in and start almost from day one. And Devin Bush, or whoever they drafted as inside linebacker, Devin Bush, Devin White, whoever. So that was an obvious need heading into 2019. As far as 2020, it was more about depth, adding depth at various positions and possible future starters for guys who may leave as early as 2021. So I think that's what this draft was all about. And heading into it, was it going to be running back at their first pick, second round, 49th overall? Was it going to be wide receiver, offensive line, outside linebacker, safety? You could have gone any number of directions. You could have made a great case for any pick. So let's start with the first pick, which was Chase Claypool, the receiver from Notre Dame. A lot of people, when this pick was announced, they didn't. Not a lot of people were behind it. I mean, I don't think people were really against it, but I think they wanted other known names that were out there. Guys like J.K. Dobbins, the running back from Ohio State, Denzel Mims, the receiver from Baylor, Cam Akers, the running back from Florida State. Those were more, I think, they were considered better draft value at that moment. And again, that could be a matter of opinion. When it came to Chase Claypool, in the months leading up to the draft, I mean, I saw him mocked anywhere from early third round to late first round. So, as far as the value they got there, I think they got a really good player. They got a player whose arrow is pointing up. I mean, he had 5 catches his freshman year. I'm sure he didn't play all that much his freshman year. And then by the time he graduated in his senior year, he had 66 catches for 1,037 yards and 13 touchdowns. So, as far as his college resume, I mean, you have to like it. You have to like the production, the fact that he got better every year. And at 6'4", 230, 238, these weights, they jump all over the place. I don't know. Let's just say 6'4", 230 plus. He brings an element to the receiving corps that the Steelers really don't have. I consider him kind of like a bigger, stronger version of Juju. But Juju's what, 6'1", 200 maybe, 210, something like that. And Claypool is again something the Steelers don't have at receiver right now. He was clocked at 4.4 in a 40 at the combine. I guess one of the knocks against him is he doesn't play up to his speed, his time speed, and he has trouble getting separation. Those are two of the knocks, I guess. But I'm sorry, when you're 6'4" and 230 plus, good luck to the 5'10", 200-pound, 190-pound defensive back is trying to cover you. You may not be able to outrun him on your way to the ball, but you're definitely going to out-physical him when the ball gets to you, and you're going to be able to come away with the football. So I think that's, again, an element that the Steelers don't have at receiver. So, all right, thank you. Kenneth McNair, Juju 6'2", 215. So, I mean, he's a little bigger than Juju and about 15 pounds heavier. And probably a half a second or a tenth of a second faster in the 40, at least at the combine. So, he's a bigger, stronger, faster version of Juju. And the question is, can he come in and contribute right away? And, if you look at recent Steelers rookie receivers, there's a precedent. He can come in and contribute. I mean, you talk about Martavis Bryant in 2014. He was a 4th-round pick. He came in. He was activated halfway through his rookie year. He made a big contribution. I was in Cincinnati for the Bengals game. I was in that end zone, in the stands in that end zone, when he ran in he scored on that 95-yard touchdown bomb from Ben Roethlisberger. So he definitely made a contribution his rookie year. Juju himself, 2017, he didn't start right away that year. He started later in the year, but even before that, I think he set a rookie record or a Steeler rookie record for touchdowns early in the year. He had, I think, 4 in the first 5 or 6 games. He was a great red zone presence right away. And then last year, Deontay Johnson, the 3rd-round pick from Toledo. He, for an offense that was severely compromised with the quarterback play and injuries, he came in and made a strong contribution for a team that almost made the playoffs despite its quarterback woes. So, yeah, I think whether he starts right away or not, I don't know. But I think there's definitely room there, beyond Juju Smith-Schuster, James Washington, who came on. I think he had a much better sophomore season than people are remembering. I mean, I think he didn't have much to improve on. I understand that based on his rookie year that was really non-existent, but he definitely had he definitely made leaps last year, and of course Deontay Johnson. So I think he can step right in behind those three and contribute and do so almost from day one, I think, in my opinion. Now, and in the meantime, one thing that I read about him that I was impressed with is before he became a star receiver at Notre Dame, he was a pretty good special teams guy, not necessarily returning kicks and punts, but on kick coverage. I mean, I think he had 11 tackles in 1 year, which is pretty good for a receiver. So he's definitely going to add that element to the team, a special teams kind of ace. And, what he does beyond 2020, what the Steelers' plans are, I don't know. But he's definitely a talent that can fortify the position that's already pretty strong with young talent. Now, I think best case scenario for Steeler Nation, he comes in and joins the other three guys, and they, including Juju, and they spend the next 3 or 4 years creating matchup problems for teams. Worst case scenario, maybe he becomes a star and takes the place of Juju, who, let's face it, they might have to move on from him after this year. When I first heard the rumors leading up to the draft that the 49ers were interested in Juju, and they were interested in trading a draft pick for him, I was like, they can't. I was literally offended. I was personally offended because I love Juju. I think most people do. He's maybe the most popular athlete in Pittsburgh right now. So, this is the guy that in most years, in previous years, the Steelers would absolutely try to sign to a second contract. I mean, he's already had 2 really productive years to start his career. He had 111 catches in I think 1,400 yards in the second year. His third year, he hit a bump, but I think a lot of people on that offense hit a bump last year because of the quarterback situation with Ben going down. So, here's a guy that he could be. He's already an ambassador type for the city. He's for the Steelers. He's already that kind of player. He's beloved. But the fact is, what if he wants number 1 receiver money? And I'm not saying he doesn't deserve that. And if he has if he bounces back to his old ways in 2020, he might deserve that kind of money. But maybe the Steelers aren't willing to pay that kind of money to a receiver. Especially when they know, like we know, that they're really good at drafting and developing receivers, and they've shown us that for the last 10 years plus. So, I was looking at the highest paid receivers in the NFL, and it started with Julio Jones at $22 million a year, and the end of the list was Adam Thielen at $16 million a year. That's a lot of money. And again, I'm not saying he's not worth it, but the Steelers have a lot of contract issues they have to focus on. They're going to have TJ Watt coming up, and he's probably going to be the highest paid Steeler defender ever. We're looking at $20 million a year. I'm thinking, because that's Aaron Donald's about $22 million a year, and he's heading for that rarefied air of Aaron Donald and his big brother, those kind of people, JJ Watt. So, they have him. They have Minka coming up in a few years. So, do they want to invest that kind of money in a receiver? So, maybe Claypool is insurance for a possible departure. And if he comes in and he flashes right away, and James Washington and Deontay Johnson continue to get better, then maybe the Steelers will feel comfortable with moving on from Juju. It would be unfortunate because, again, I think he could be a really great player for them. I think he could be this era's Hines Ward, a guy that plays here 11, 12 years, gets you 1,000 catches, maybe a couple Super Bowl MVPs, that kind of thing. And it's just a pillar in the community. But, you can't pay everybody. That's the unfortunate thing. So we'll see. So I think, best case scenario, Claypool and joins Juju, and they create a awesome receiver duo for the next 5-6 years. Worst case scenario, as far as on the good scale, maybe Claypool becomes their number one guy, or James Washington or Deontay. But either way, maybe they have a strong trio going into next year, knowing that they're going to have to move on from Juju. So that's the second round pick. So let's talk about the third round pick, 102 overall, Alex Highsmith from Charlotte, the edge rusher / outside linebacker. Now, speaking of Deontay Johnson, when I first heard that name on last Friday, I was like, who? Why are they drafting this guy? I never heard of this guy before. He plays at a small school, and it was kind of like the same reaction I had about Deontay Johnson in 2019. I never heard of the guy, and with this being a position, outside linebacker was a position they definitely were lacking in depth. I mean, you have Tuzar Skipper and Ola Denny behind T.J. Watt and Bud Dupree, but they've had great preseasons recently, but they're unproven. So depth was definitely a concern, and they waived or released Anthony Chickillo, who gave them okay depth and really good special teams play, but he really didn't make a difference. And so there was definitely room to upgrade there. So so Alex Highsmith, I would expect that maybe a bigger name, but the more you learn about the guy, the more he looks like a complete football player, and a guy that I was listening to an interview with his position coach from college the other day I think it was on Tuesday, and he talked. I read something about him after the draft was first announced, and it said that maybe I misinterpreted it, that he was his pass rushing moves were predicated on speed, because he had 15 sacks last year at Charlotte. He had 21 and a half tackles for loss, school records, and it seemed like a guy that just blew away his competition just from pure physicality. But the more I read about the guy, he actually already has an arsenal of moves. And at 250 pounds. He's probably a little light right now for the NFL, and he has to get a little bit stronger. But if those moves can translate to the NFL, then maybe this could be a diamond in the rough kind of player. And he's your typical defender from a small school. He was a walk-on, which now seems unbelievable that he had to walk on at a place like Charlotte for as much as he dominated during his 4 years there, especially the last two. I mean, Dabo Swinney, the coach from Clemson, I mean, he singled him out last year after the game and talked about what a remarkable player he is. But again, he has a high motor, and from what I understand, from listening to his college coach talk about him, he's willing to do whatever it takes to get better and to learn and to help the team win. He screams special teams ace at the very least. So, this is a guy that if on the low end of the scale, as far as the good stuff, if you can find somebody that can come in and be a better version of Anthony Chickillo and come in and maybe flash every now and then, and be a pass rush specialist and get you some sacks in key moments, like key passing downs, and obviously be a very good special teams player like Anthony Chickillo was when he was here, I think that would be worth this pick. But again, you never know where your next great defensive player, your next great ball players are going to come from. That's a great thing about the draft. I mean, there's so many Cinderella stories, and it seems weird saying calling this guy a Cinderella story, being a late third round pick. But again, he was a player that not that many people knew about prior to the draft. So, if he does become more than just a backup, it would be a great find for the Steelers. I mean, he has some things to work on. Again, he's 250, so he probably has to put on some muscle, starting in his rookie year. And from what I read about him, he can get swallowed up while trying to set the edge on running plays. These are things that even T.J. Watt and Bud Dupree had to get better at when they came into the league, and they're, especially T.J. Watt, they're superstars. So, and they're former first-round picks, so they have higher pedigree. So if they have to learn it, I don't think we should be surprised that a guy like Alex Highsmith has to, maybe needs to work on these things and polish his game. But just from a character standpoint and a willingness to get better, and a willingness to learn and to be a sponge and to learn from some of the best in the game, meaning TJ Watt and Bud Dupree. I have no doubt that just from everything I've heard about the guy, that he's going to do whatever it takes to get the most out of his abilities. And who knows where that could lead? That could lead to a future starter. And maybe the Steelers are hoping that. Speaking of financial concerns, I mean, Bud Dupree, he's on the franchise tag right now, and I'm sure they'd like to get him. They'd like to get a long-term deal worked out with him. But I mean, if they're going to be paying TJ Watt $20 million a year, is Bud going to accept much less per year on an annual salary than the 15.8 he's going to be making in 2020 with the franchise tag? He already signed that, so he's going to be making that this year, whether he works out a new deal or not. So, I just think if Alex Highsmith, if he flashes enough in his rookie year, even if he still has to learn, to play outside linebacker, even if he's still unrefined with, setting the edge and pass coverage, those kind of things, if he flashes enough as a pass rusher that there's still a ceiling there for him to improve, then maybe the Steelers are confident to move on from Bud after this year and trust that Alex Highsmith will improve as a starter in 2021. So it's depth for now. Hopefully, he's a guy that can step in and give them quality reps, if not right away, definitely by the end of his rookie year. And best case scenario, if the Steelers really do have to move on from Bud, maybe Alex Highsmith becomes a starter for them, and they don't have to use another first-round draft pick on an outside linebacker like they did with Jarvis Jones and Bud and TJ Watt. So, that's Alex Highsmith. He's a guy that, again, I wasn't really that impressed with when I heard the pick, but having a week to read about him and learn about him and learn about his story. I mean, this is a guy that is definitely going to have a chip on his shoulder. I mean, to have to not only not get recruited by major schools like Clemson, but to have to walk on at Charlotte, I think here's a guy that's always going to be out to prove that he's a better player than people give him credit for. So I'm excited about that pick, and I think he could be a diamond in the rough for the Steelers if he is willing and able to be coached up and get the most out of his abilities. So that's the first two picks. Let's go to Anthony McFarland, running back, Maryland, who they picked with their first fourth-round pick, 124 overall. McFarland was another guy I really never heard of. There was a belief out there, and I even kind of talked myself into it, that running back was the number one need as far as the depth was concerned. But, they passed on J.K. Dobbins. They passed on Cam Akers. So they went with McFarland in the fourth round. And the first thing I noticed when I went to YouTube and checked out his highlights was just how fast he was, which is, it's a universal thing that everybody knows about him right now. That's the number one attribute that everybody talks about, is his speed, his 4.4 speed. But it's so obvious on screen. I mean, he's so decisive. The second he takes the ball, the handoff, he's gone. Like he's it's almost like he's at full speed just the second he gets past the line of scrimmage, which, obviously the Steelers don't have that in their arsenal of running backs. Maybe Kareth White. I don't know a whole lot about him. He's a guy they picked up on from I think the Bears practice squad last year. So, he's a bit of an unknown, but he does have that kind of speed and quick twitch ability. But as far as some of the recent draft picks, James Conner, Jalen Samuels, and Benny Snell Jr., no, they're not that kind of running back. They don't have that kind of explosiveness. So, like Chase Claypool, McFarland brings a different element to the running back room that they don't have. Now, the thing that I find intriguing about him is if you look at J.K. Dobbins and you look at Anthony McFarland, I mean, they look like the same kind of running back. They're both about 5'9", both about 200 pounds, 210, something like that. And they're both 4.4. They were both timed around 4.4 in the 40. The only difference is production. J.K. Dobbins was a 4-year player at Ohio State. He finished his career with 4,000 yards. He rushed for 2,003 yards last year. So, I mean, he played for a more prestigious program in Ohio State than McFarland did at Maryland. So, I mean, he was the better prospect coming out of college or entering the draft, no doubt. But it's kind of interesting to know, not that we'll ever know this, is how McFarland's draft stock would have been helped by another year or two in college. He only played 2 years. He only rushed the football 245 times. He had a great rookie year, or a freshman year, I should say. He averaged he rushed for 1,000 yards, averaged 7.6 yards per carry. His sophomore year, he was slowed a little bit by a high ankle sprain. That kind of, any football player that has had any athlete really that's had an ankle sprain will tell you that it's not an easy injury to come back from. It takes a long time to heal. I've had at least one high ankle sprain that I know of, and it took, 2 months later, I was still kind of hobbling around, and I was just, walking to work. So it's a tough injury to come back from, and he apparently was suffering from it for a good bit of 2019. So from what I've been told, from what I've heard, the people at Maryland were ready to move on from the old regime. They had a coaching turnover, and Matt Canada, the quarterback's coach for the Steelers, now he was involved, and he was the offensive coordinator there, and he was the interim coach for a year. So there was a regime change, and they kind of wanted to move on from McFarland, and that may explain why he didn't play another year or two at Maryland. So, at worst, a guy like McFarland, if he comes in and he's a nice change of pace running back for them, backup running back, number 2 running back, a guy who develops into a weapon out of the backfield, catching the football. He didn't really do a lot of that at Maryland, but obviously, he has the athleticism and the speed to be a weapon if he can refine that part of his game. So, when you're talking about the Steelers running back situation, it's really not that much different than a receiver. There's a former Pro Bowl player in James Conner who is heading into the final year of his rookie deal. So, the Steelers want to give a guy like that a second contract. He's a great player, great story. He's proven to be productive when, he's healthy, but the problem has always been the health with him. His rookie year, he had a torn MCL. His second year, he had a really great year. It was his Pro Bowl year, but his season was sort of derailed at the end by injuries. He had a concussion, I think an ankle or a foot injury at the end that kind of slowed him down. And then last year, he had a whole array of ailments that slowed down. He missed 6 games. So, if the Steelers are going to running back by committee, maybe that's one reason why they want to move on from James Conner. But if they're still, if their philosophy is still to have a workhorse type running back, which even last year they didn't really demonstrate that they were willing to do the running back by committee. That was more out of necessity because of injuries to James Conner. If they're still intent on doing the workhorse running back thing, which has gone all the way back to Fast Willie Parker, can they trust a guy like Conner to stay healthy? So far they haven't been able to. They haven't been able to rely on him. So if they want to still use that kind of a running back, a workhorse kind of running back, a guy they want to run to the wheels fall off, then maybe James Conner's not their guy moving forward if he's already missed 11 games in 3 years. So maybe Benny Snell Jr. Makes a huge leap from his first to his second year, and he came on pretty strong last year at the end of the year, I thought, and I think he had 424 yards, I want to say, by season's end, which was pretty good because he didn't really do a whole lot at the beginning of the year. So if he comes on in 2020 and he's basically the same kind of running back as James Conner, he was productive in college. He's a hard-nosed runner. He's a downhill runner. So, and he's probably an underrated guy out of the backfield. So if he shows potential as a workhorse guy next year, then maybe the Steelers move on from James Conner and decide to go with Benny Snell as their number 1 guy next year. Or they go with a running back by committee approach and McFarland's the lightning to Benny Snell's thunder, and then you have Jalen Samuels as a jack of all trades kind of guy who can play the wildcat and catch the ball out of the backfield, that kind of thing. Best case scenario, though, I mean, they always say you never know. You can find a running back in just about any round, even undrafted. Best case scenario, maybe Anthony McFarland becomes a star. I mean, you just never know. That's a great thing. Again, that's a great thing about the draft. I mean, a lot of people aren't aren't that high on the McFarland pick. It's kind of mixed, especially again when so many people wanted them to draft J.K. Dobbins, and then you had people wanting them to trade for Leonard Fournette, and then you get this McFarland kid. It's like, all right, but he has low wear and tear. That's one good thing about him. A high ankle sprain is not something that's going to dog a football player. I would think for years. It's not like getting an MCL or an ACL or that kind of thing. So who knows? Maybe he emerges as a superstar for them. That's you just never know. But I think the fact that he was coached by Matt Canada at Maryland and he's familiar with him, I think they're going to do whatever they can, even in his rookie year, to try to utilize him in their offense. So he could be a really dangerous weapon for them as early as next season. So that's the first fourth round pick, and that's Anthony McFarland. Now let's go to the second fourth round pick, 135th overall, and that is Kevin. I'm sorry, I'm a little bit nervous. Kevin Dotson, guard from Louisiana, everybody's favorite Steelers pick. I mean, who doesn't love this guy? Who didn't praise this pick? You know, he's not only a great guy and a fun guy and a longtime Steeler fan. He grew up a Jerome Bettis fan. From what Brian told me on Monday, I learned from him that so many of his passwords are 36, some combination of 36. So I mean, here's a guy that grew up. A lot of draft picks say they're the team that just drafted them was their favorite team growing up. Looks like Kevin Dotson is sincere. If his house was any indication, when he was welcoming himself to Steeler Nation by waving the terrible towel, he was covered in black and gold. So he's a legit Steeler fan. And again, great personality. But more importantly, he was a highly productive left guard at Louisiana. Or, I'm sorry, right guard. Yeah, he was a right guard. I'm not sure what he was. I can't remember. I think he was a right guard. It doesn't matter. He was a guard. And maybe you guys can help me out. Was he a left guard or a right guard? I'll give you a shout out if you do. But even though scouts were going to Louisiana to look at Robert Hunt, the tackle who played alongside Kevin Dotson at Louisiana, he got snubbed for the combine, which I just don't understand. I mean, here's a guy who was, again, a 4-year starter. Okay, right guard, says Jared Devil. Guy Rose says left guard. So he's a guard. So anyway, even though he was a 4-year starter, he started 52 games at Louisiana. He was a 3-time all conference. He was voted all Sun Belt 3 times. He was voted an AP All-American last year, but yet he wasn't invited to the combine, which it just doesn't compute that the scouts and coaches would miss him. But enough people thought enough about him that he was still rated fairly high, and when it came to the guards heading into the draft, he was like around the top 10, which is still pretty good. It gave him a pretty good chance to get drafted. So he loves to play the run. He's described as a road grader. He needs some work in pass protection, but that's where Sean Surratt comes in, right? That's where he comes into play. Here's a guy who mentored under Mike Munchak for a number of years, and now he's the offensive line coach, and this is probably the best prospect that he's been given since taking over from Mike Munchak last year. So I'm pretty confident that he can polish Dotson's game, and this is like a strong candidate to start fairly soon. Maybe he starts at left guard this year. Maybe he starts in 2021. Maybe this selection ultimately keeps Matt Filer at right tackle. You just don't know. But it's a great pick, and it might be one that Ramon Foster just retired after 11 years. So this seems like the kind of guy that if 10 years from now you look back and said, okay, Kevin Dotson was drafted, he stepped in fairly quickly and took over Ramon Foster at left guard and played a decade there. You wouldn't be surprised. So I think this guy is going to be everybody's favorite rookie. I think he's going to be a fan favorite. He's going to be, like the next Juju, the kind of guy. I see a very big presence on social media. I know a lot of people don't like that, but these are young guys, so they're going to be on social media. So I expect him to be a fan favorite pretty quickly, as much as an offensive lineman can be. But if anybody can do it, from what I've seen, he can pull it off. But again, more importantly, I think he could be a real find for them at left guard. So let's go on to the 6th round. We have 2 more to go. And that would be Antoine Brooks, safety from Maryland. 198th overall selection of the 2020 NFL Draft. Now, safety was a position that definitely was lacking in depth heading into 2020, heading into the draft, I should say. You had Minkah Fitzpatrick. He's obviously a superstar, or headed to superstardom as the free safety. And you had Terrell Edmonds, the 2018 number 1 pick, as strong safety. The opinions on him are still sort of mixed, although he has started 2 straight years, which is encouraging. He has been able to stay on the field, even though he hasn't made a huge impact over 2 years. He has started, which is a good sign. So hopefully he continues to improve. But anyway, safety was a huge need in terms of depth. Because you have Jordan Dangerfield. They had to cut Cam Kelly after his unfortunate off the field issue. So they were lacking there. So, this Brooks guy, he seems like your typical, down in the box safety, a guy that is a short tackler and a great open field tackler from what I've read. He's intense. They described him, the one draft profile I read, described him as a brick mailbox, whatever that is. I'm not sure what a brick mailbox is, but that was a good, that basically means he's in shape, and he's a hard hitter. So that's, and there's a high football IQ, which, is great to see, because, a guy like that drafted in the 6th round, like Alex Highsmith, you figure he's going to do whatever it takes to get the most out of his abilities. He's going to be coachable. He's going to be a sponge. He's going to try to figure things out, based on what I've read. He was a leader in the secondary, a leader for that defense. The only problem is his, I guess, he has the typical, stiff hips. He's not fluid. He doesn't have the speed to cover one-on-one. He doesn't have the speed to cover the deep part of the field, that kind of thing. The typical things you would hear about a 6th round draft pick, a safety picked in that late, But like Alex Highsmith, like even Chase Claypool, this guy screams special teams ace. I mean, if there's a guy with that kind of intensity, a guy that's that sure of a tackler, the first thing I expect from him is to be able to win on special teams in his rookie year. So if the least that he does is provide really good depth, become a really good backup at the safety spot, and become a special teams ace, well, that's a pretty good way to spend. That's a pretty good player to get in the 6th round. Now, the one intriguing aspect the thing I've read about him is that guys like him tend to fall in the draft in this modern in a modern era, because there are so many hybrid players in the secondary, and coaches don't know what to do with guys like him. Is he a safety? Is he a dime linebacker? Is he a slot? What is he? And, if he gets the proper coaching, maybe he can become a really good football player. Maybe he can become that guy that everything guy, like they wanted from Morgan Burnett. They kind of wanted out of Terrell Edmonds when they drafted him. He could play dime, he could play safety, he could play the slot, he could do everything. He's an all everything defensive back. So maybe he can become that kind of player for them. You never know. Again, they only had 6 picks, so they couldn't address every need with a premium draft pick. So it's in some cases you just have to hope you can draft a guy late and develop him. I mean, look at Ryan Clark. He was undrafted. He was an undrafted free agent, and he's probably one of the most underrated safeties in team history. I mean, you got Troy Polamalu and Don Shell and Carnell Lake to try to contend with, but Ryan Clark had a pretty good career here, and he was undrafted. So, you never know. I mean, maybe he doesn't make the team right away. Maybe he has to sit a season or two, learn for a season or two on the practice squad, and then maybe he's like Mike Hilton 2 or 3 years from now, and he is a really good football player that they drafted late and developed. And sometimes teams need to do that because again, you can't fix all your problems early in the draft. So that's Antoine Brooks. So let's go to the seventh pick. Or I'm sorry, the seventh round pick, and that would be Carlos Davis, 232 overall, the defensive tackle from Nebraska. Now, if you read this guy's draft profile, it's not impressive at all. The grade I saw, I think it was 5.44 at NFL.com, and according to that grade, he should have been an undrafted free agent. So, he didn't even start. I think he didn't even start at all 4 seasons at Nebraska. I think he lost his starting job at one point. So, but the more you read about him, the more you realize what a great athlete he is. I read something where he ran a 4.82 in the 40, and he's like 310, 320 pounds. That's a pretty freakish athlete. That makes you wonder why you couldn't get more out of him in college. But he was a track and field star. I guess that was like his second sport or his first sport at Nebraska, from what I read. So maybe he couldn't dedicate himself to football as much as he wanted. So maybe if he gets the right coaching and the right development at the pro level, maybe he could be another diamond in the rough. Maybe he has to spend a year on the practice squad. But I mean, if you're looking at one position of the team that was kind of set, even though Javon Hargrave left via free agency, it was a defensive line. I mean, you have obviously Cam Hayward, who's as good as it gets as far as defensive lineman. You have Stefan Tuitt coming back from an injury. He plays at a Pro Bowl level when he's healthy. His only problem has been injuries. And then Tyson Alualu, who is a very solid veteran, another guy who is a high draft pick. He played for Jacksonville for a number of years, and he came here. And now he's provided them with really solid depth over the last couple of years. So you have 3 guys that are really solid starters. And then, as far as depth, you have Isaiah Buggs, who, the jury's still out on him. He was last year's seventh round pick. And then Big Dan McCullers, say what you want about him, but he's managed to stick around since 2014. Maybe he doesn't give you quality reps, quality snaps, but, he can come in every now and then and give you some snaps, some reps. So, from that standpoint, the defensive line is in pretty good shape. So, there's time for a guy like a Carlos Davis to develop. And if that's on a practice squad, if that's on the 53-man roster, you don't know. If he gets some really good coaching, then maybe, this would be a real find. And maybe down the road, if you have to move on from Cam Hayward, who may retire in a few years, or maybe Tyson Alualu, who's getting up there, maybe instead of using a first or second round pick to revamp the defensive line, maybe a guy like Davis can step in and be a starter for you. Will he be a nose tackle? I don't know. With that athleticism, he sounds a lot like Javon Hargrave. Maybe he could be a really athletic, big defensive end. So you never know. But that's the draft class. Those are my thoughts. And now I will take the next 5 minutes or so and answer some of your questions. So fire away. Just take it easy on me. Again, it's my first show. I have the plays here on my wrist. So I'll look to see if I can find some questions here that I can answer. But there's Steelers freak who's calling Carlos Davis practice squad meet. Maybe, but that's what my favorite pick. Dave Shipley asked, "Who's my favorite pick?" Let me see. I can put that up there. I think I have the ability now. Yeah, there you go. I can do it. Who's your favorite pick? Easy. Kevin Dotson. I love that guy. I love him. I think he's a guy who could step in right away and start from day one. Will he or not? I don't know. But he definitely has that potential. And I think he's definitely going to be the steal of this draft when all is said and done. At least that's my prediction anyway. Here's a question from. Let's see if I can get that up there. Oh, that's I don't know. I don't know English. I don't know that one. Sorry, that was not the one I wanted to put up there. My bad. Technical difficulties. Let's see. Here's one. Here's the burning question that never seems to go away from Dallas Quinley. How do we get insurance in case our veteran quarterback goes down? Well, I don't know. I mean, Lance Williams made a compelling case about Andy Dalton last night, signing him, bringing him in here, and how, you would be comfortable with him if he had to play 7 or 8 games. And that's a great point. The only problem is the Steelers don't seem to feel that way. So they're comfortable with Mason Rudolph at this point. Maybe things change. Maybe things change in the preseason. Maybe he comes in and Mason is Landry Jones 2016. He's throwing interceptions every game in the preseason, and the fans turn on him. And then the Steelers say, "Look, we had a nice look at this guy last year. He played 10 games. We got a great look at him last year. He doesn't seem to be improving, and maybe they go out and try to make a trade for a veteran backup." But then again, maybe Mason makes a huge jump from his first year to his second year. I mean, that's one thing about quarterbacks. A lot of times people look at a young quarterback and they make up their mind, right away, that he doesn't have it. He doesn't have great pocket presence. He has nervous feet. He doesn't go through his progression, so automatically he can't improve on any of those things. Well, the quarterback position is the one position. If you're not a starter, you really can't get live game reps, real live reps in the regular season. So, how do you improve unless you get in there and take your lumps? So hopefully Mason's experience last year, even though it was a lot of good and bad, hopefully that helps him become a better quarterback. And then he'll be the insurance that the Steelers are looking for behind Ben Roethlisberger. So those are my thoughts on Mason. Let's see here. There's Donald Nolan. It's not a question, but he wants to congratulate me. And, Ben has a room at the VA hospital. I'm not doing this right, by the way. I'm a step too slow on clicking on the right questions, and that's fine. I'm a rookie. This is my first show. It's my first start in the NFL, so to speak. So, that was just a little joke there. And, Ben's been pretty durable since his last major injury prior to last year was 2015 when he had the MCL injury that he missed a few games. But, he was pretty durable for a few years there. Things happen. He's 38. Hopefully he comes back close to 100% and he gives the Steelers a couple more years of really great quarterback play. And hopefully that can lead them to a championship, or at least a great run at one, which I think would be great after missing the playoffs the last 2 years. Let's see what else we have here. I'll take 1 or 2 more and then we'll wrap things up for the week. But again, I want to thank you all for joining me and participating and listening. Let's see. What is this? Let's get this one up here. Wow. Once again, I was half a second late. Bear with me. I wanted to get Dallas Quinley up there again. Do you think our future WB is on the roster now? You mean QB? If you mean QB, I can't answer that question. I don't know enough about Mason Rudolph yet. I don't think it's Devlin Hodges or JT. I don't know anything about JT Barrett, so I can't really say that. But it'll be interesting to see how much Mason improves in his third year after all the experience he had last year. So do I think he's on the roster right now? No. But the way it is with franchise quarterbacks, finding those guys, he might not be on anybody's roster. He might not even be born yet. That's just how it goes. Those guys are hard to find. So we'll see. I'll take one more and then I'll wrap it up. So let's see what's the best question I can find out here in the last minute or so. Let's see. We'll go with Donald Nolan here. Does everyone think that Mason and Duck hit their ceiling last year with no possible room for improvement? I don't think that at all. I don't think, because there's nothing like experience. I mean, the jury's still out on that. How do we know? I mean, Troy Polamalu he was very bad as a rookie, and then by his second season he was an All-Pro. So there's no substitute for experience, and both of those guys, especially Mason, had invaluable experience last year. Now it's up to them to improve upon that. So at this point, I don't think they hit their ceiling last year. So that's all the questions for today. And I just want to thank you guys and joining me for my first show. You guys were awesome. You guys took it easy on me. If you did sack me, you let me down easy. That's good to know. But before I go, I just want to give a shout out to Terry Hanratty, who was a former Steelers quarterback. He was drafted in the second round in 1969. He's out of Notre Dame. He was the guy that the Steelers wanted to pick that year because he was from Notre Dame, and he grew up in nearby Butler, PA. So he was the guy they wanted to pick in the first round, and he was part of the reason why the paper was asking the next day, Joe who. So anyway, Terry played here for, I think, 69 through 75. He won 2 Super Bowl rings here. He started the game in 1974 during the regular season. I don't know if people know that. He started 17 games total during his career here in Pittsburgh. And then he finished up his career in Tampa Bay in 76. But anyway, the reason why I wanted to give him a shout out is because I listened to an interview with him on, I think it was Wednesday, with Mark Madden, who's a local radio talk show host. And Terry Hanratty had a very bad bout with coronavirus recently. He's 72 years old. He was in the hospital. He lost 16, 17 pounds, something like that. He said even when he got discharged from the hospital, he couldn't even make it up the steps. He had to have a couple people help him get up the steps to his house. But he's doing much better now, and continued great health for Terry Hanratty. So again, that's my first show. This is your first episode of Steelers Brunch with Tony. I'm your host, Tony Defeo. You can find me. You can see me again on Monday with Brian Anthony Davis at 5:00 for Steelers Q&A. And again, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Click like. Give us a lot of love. And I'll see you guys next week. Have a great weekend.